Okay, so easy one today. It's Zacchaeus. We all know Zacchaeus, don't we? We learnt it at Sunday school. I remember at Sunday school at the age of 4 or 5 when we used to have those sticker books, and we used to have a sticker for every Bible story we learnt. And I'm sure Zacchaeus was up there, little tiny man up a tree. Very memorable picture. So let's unpack the story a little bit more and see what God's telling us today. So, it's just near the end of the story. Jesus is coming to the end of his ministry, and it says his face is set towards Jerusalem. Jericho was an ancient city. It is the oldest walled city. It is close to Jerusalem. It's on the way to Jerusalem, but it is separated by some hills, so there's still a little journey to get to Jerusalem. Jesus is planning what's going to happen to him in Jerusalem. He knows that he is going to die and he is going to rise from the dead. Not really anyone else understands this at the moment. But let's look at Zacchaeus a little bit. We learn quite a bit about Zacchaeus right at the beginning of chapter 19. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. And we know he was short. Now, when it says he was a tax collector, that means he worked for the Romans. The Romans were the people who ruled the country, and they collected tax. And that would make Zacchaeus very unpopular. Usually, tax collectors would cheat people by taking more than they should and keeping quite a lot of it for themselves. We know Zacchaeus was one of the people that cheated people. He admits it. When he says at the end, I will pay 4 times back what I have stolen from people. So a bit of an unpopular, unscrupulous character. Also, we know he is short. It says, because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. I don't think we need necessarily think he was like teeny tiny, like really short. We don't need to think that. Absolutely everybody was short in those days. The average height was 5'3" for men, so that's quite short. Maybe he was just an inch shorter, maybe a bit shorter than the average person. Maybe he was a little bit late to get to the crowd, and when there's a big crowd, often you can't really get a good view. If the Queen's coming by and you want to see the Queen, if you've left it a bit late, you might get stuck at the back and you can't see over people's heads. And because he was an unpopular guy, the crowd wouldn't really have let him through to the front like you might let through a nice little person. You might let them through to get a better view. So he had this strange idea that he would climb a tree. But why did he want to see Jesus? He certainly heard about Jesus. And maybe he's been touched by the recent healing of the blind man, which has also happened in Jericho. Let's have a look at that again, starting at verse 35. He called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. That was the blind man. Now, Son of David is one of the titles for the Messiah. So the blind man is calling to Jesus, calling him the Messiah. And it's interesting that Jesus doesn't tell him off for doing that. He doesn't say, no, I'm not, don't call me Son of David. He accepts this title, the title of Messiah. Jesus said to the blind man, what do you want me to do for you? Think about it. What do you want me to do for you? As if Jesus could have answered any request. To us it seems obvious a blind man would want his sight. But Jesus gave him the choice. He could have asked for anything, as if Jesus had the power to do anything in that man's life. And I think he did a lot more than restore his sight. He could have asked, I would like to see the Messiah come in glory. I would like to sit with you in heaven when you achieve your kingdom. Have I moved that? I've just moved my microphone. But he asks for his sight, and Jesus gives him his sight. So Zacchaeus has heard about this story. He wants to see Jesus. Now we can see that Zacchaeus was desperate. He didn't give up easily. He could have arrived and seen there was a big crowd. Jesus was coming along. He was moving along like a procession. The big crowd in the way. Zacchaeus could have given up. He could have said, oh, well, not to be, maybe not, not today. But he makes a complete idiot of himself by climbing a tree. We know he was wealthy. He was well thought of by the Romans. He was employed by the Romans. And he was unpopular. So if people saw him climbing a tree, they might have laughed at him, because that's not the sort of thing a respectable wealthy man does. I expect he wasn't very keen for people to see him in the tree. That's why I think he probably was hiding behind the leaves. He wants to see Jesus, but he's not really sure that he wants Jesus to see him. But we know what happens. Jesus stops right by the tree, and he looks directly at him, just as if Jesus knew everything about Zacchaeus, and as if he knew that Zacchaeus had needs that could be met on this day. So what does Jesus say to Zacchaeus? Come down. Find it. Come down. I will eat at your house today. Now, of all the things he could have said, surely this is unexpected. Jesus' plan is to go to Jerusalem. His aim is to go to the place where he is going to die, give up his life, and be raised again. That's his plan. But he's willing to stop the plan and visit with Zacchaeus and spend time with him. Inviting himself to dinner seems a little bit cheeky from our British perspective. We don't generally invite ourselves to dinner at someone's house, especially if we don't know them, really. But it wasn't just that. It was to spend time with Zacchaeus, to spend time in conversation, to enter the house of a sinner, to associate with someone who was unscrupulous, cheating, thieving. He knows the name of Zacchaeus. Like I said, he probably knew an awful lot about him. Jesus wants to form a relationship with Zacchaeus. Isn't that amazing? And how does Zacchaeus respond? He is overwhelmed. And he says, I will give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Now he says this publicly. And you can imagine there were quite a lot of people there hearing this that thought, right, they're going to take him up on that offer. He makes a public declaration that his life is going to be different. Zacchaeus has been transformed. Jesus came to Zacchaeus and showed love and friendship. And Zacchaeus became a new man. We might say he was born again. He was a different person. He was transformed. Now this story is followed by the story of the master and the miners, yeah. And I did read that and think Minions, but that's just me. That's just me. The parable of the 10 minas. I'm not going to go into this story, and it's very, very similar to the stories we've looked at recently when we looked at the parable of the talents. And I remember that was a Friday conversation, maybe about 2 months ago, something like that, when we were doing the Friday conversations about parables. And I think what I've looked at this, and I would summarize it as use what you have. Use what you have. And Zacchaeus decided, after meeting Jesus, to use what he has. He will use his wealth to bless other people. He is going to give away half his possessions. And he's going to give back to anyone who's cheated. He is going to use what he has. And a challenge for you today is, can we use what we have for the sake of Jesus and his kingdom? So, what happened next? As I've indicated about Jesus, Jesus went on into Jerusalem. He was acclaimed, praised on Palm Sunday. He was crucified. He rose again. That's the story of Jesus. What happened to Zacchaeus? Well, we don't actually know. Maybe he might have followed Jesus into Jerusalem. He may have become one of the followers of Jesus in Jerusalem. He may have witnessed the resurrection. Maybe he heard that command, go out into the ends of the earth and make disciples. That may have happened. We don't actually know. But we do know that he became a disciple of Jesus. And we can bet that he told everybody that he met Jesus and his life was transformed. So I'm going to read again that little bit I read right at the beginning of our meeting today from Ephesians. Ephesians 1, 19 and 20. I'll start from 18. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Jesus Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms. The same power that he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead, that same power, that we may know it and it may work in us. So today we're looking at transformation. I know this is something it's part of our series. We're looking at sharing Jesus, encountering Jesus. And something else that struck me when I was looking at those Friday conversations with interviews. What struck me with that chap Liam from the Salvation Army, he said the moment he met Jesus, he gave up swearing, and that made a big difference to his life. People could see that big difference in his life. It changed him. He became a different person. I started thinking about myself. I became a Christian when I was 18, which is a few years ago, actually, believe it or not. And okay, I didn't do any swearing much, really. And perhaps people might have thought I was quite a nice person because I went to church and prayed and stuff like that. But I was quite a grumpy teenager. And I was quite critical of people in my family, particularly my mother. Those were the things that God changed in me. He changed me from being someone who was always grumpy, sulky, moaning, negative. You could say a typical teenager. But it changed me. And then I remember that my dad commented, I used to be always singing. I'd be around the house singing Christian songs and choruses. And my dad commented, well, you seem a lot happier than you used to be. So that was a small change perhaps, but maybe it was significant for the people I lived with. I was very critical of my mother, and I found after I became a Christian, I had much more compassion. I had much more time for her problems, and not just thinking she was self-centered. Perhaps I was self-centered too. When we meet with Jesus, he transforms us. He may transform us in big ways, like Zacchaeus, who gave away half his possessions. He may transform us in ways that are a bit more subtle. But Jesus transforms us. And the same power that he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead is available to us. So we can be ambassadors for Jesus. We can tell people our story of how he has changed us. We can tell people about Jesus. Amen.